All right, I've been trying to get this guy on forever because he's crazy, mad busy with Jay. I'm gonna assume that you are living in your professional dream world right now.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assumption. I mean, I'm in the job that I've sort of always wanted to be in, and I was in it for a lot of lean years, at least for the team. And it's different now. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they've got a superstar quarterback, and they're Super Bowl contenders, and those are things that you and I have talked about for a long time. That it wasn't always like that around here, and just the immense interest, particularly in Josh Allen, but it filters down, to the rest of the team is really cool, right? It's great for me. It's great for the business. But it's more so, I've talked about this before with people and in interviews and things like that. But, one of the things that I thought of, or that I've thought about a lot lately. I spoke at my high school. It was really neat about a month ago. They asked me to come back and speak to a couple of classes, and it was really fun for me to do that. But one of the things that I had mentioned to them was that I've thought a lot about, if the Bills get there, right? If they get over the hump. And I'm going to be the guy that writes that story that's going to exist and live on in probably basements and bar rooms and man caves and offices. Hopefully, those words that I write about that game are going to be on the front page of the sports section of the Buffalo News the day after the Bills win the Super Bowl. And I'm hoping that that's going to sell a lot of copies, and it's going to be kept by a lot of people. And it's a sort of a weighty thing to think about, but it's also an incredible honor, because it's my family that's going to be reading those words. It's my best friends. It's this entire community that I feel so attached to. And so to think about that is just a really, really neat thought for me. And it's something, like I said, I've been thinking about a lot lately. There's a lot of pressure, I guess, in some ways that comes with that. You want it to be good, but it would be an incredible honor. And I feel like it's something that, it might happen. It's a realistic thought.
Yeah.
It's for a long time, it was never a realistic thought. We're in a different place now, though.
That's crazy cool perspective. And I never would have asked you that question about, you thinking about that. Because it absolutely is reality. I mean, they're the odds on favorite to win the Super Bowl in Vegas right now. And I want to talk about that a little later in the podcast. But yeah, I mean, to think about, I mean, you're a young man. I mean, to think about the fact that you're not going to be on the front page of the sports page, by the way, if doing the Super Bowl. You're going to be on the front page of the front page, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, sure.
so,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a really cool honor in your hometown to think about having the privilege of being able to do and be a part of. That's really super cool. And yeah, you and I both, when I was doing Bills radio, I mean, gosh, those were super lean years that teased us every single year. There was that little tiny tease. We were like,
Yeah.
man, they could be, and they never were, right? And now you're in this spot where, holy cow, you're living what I think every sports writer would ever want to be living, and that's covering arguably their favorite team in their hometown and then seeing them do as well as they're doing and ultimately winning a championship. That's awesome. So you were part of, I don't know if anyone's ever said this, and I'll say it, and I might not be right, but it's fair. You're kind of like the first family of media in Buffalo. I mean, I'm sure people have mentioned that to you somehow, some way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I mean, I'm a small part of that. I mean, I think that my wife would be the one that, if we go to Wegmans, is getting the attention, right? Or walking around the Galleria Mall or whatever it may be. But it's neat. It is cool that we're both in the industry in some way. I'm immensely proud of what she's done. She's a Buffalo girl too, graduated from Sweet Home, and a lot of the things that I said about the Bills. She shares the same feelings, getting a chance to, be watched by her family and her friends every morning on TV on Channel 2. For anybody who doesn't know, my wife is Melissa Holmes. She's the anchor, the morning show anchor at Channel 2, along with Pete Gallivan. And it was neat. We were down in Florida just last week and visiting her parents, their snowbirds, and they watch her on whatever system they've got, Sling TV or some kind of system, set up that they can watch her every morning down in Florida. And that is just so cool, I think, because, and honestly, for them, they're away for, from January through the end of April. It's a long time, but they feel like more connected to her because they see her every single morning. And so I had never really thought about that too, that they don't, obviously it's not the same as just popping over or going out for dinner, but they see her every morning. And there's a lot of people that feel that way too. And, in terms of our relationship, to understand each other's job, I think the way that we do, even if they're different mediums, I think is really good for us. It's helpful for her. She can bounce things off of me. I mean, she's my first proofreader on most stories, certainly bigger stories. I will have Melissa read it before I file it. Maybe not the smaller stuff, but if it's a story that I care about, that I've put a lot of time in, she's going to be the first one that reads it. And, it's funny. She probably wouldn't want me to say this, but some of our biggest disagreements maybe stem from her suggestions in my stories. And it's like, no, I've spent a lot of time. I want it this way. You know what I mean? But that's healthy. That's good. And, just even this morning, talking about, potential story idea for her, that she then took to her boss. So it's interesting that, we've got that dynamic that, again, it's not exactly the same business. There are differences, but there's some overlap, there's some similarity. And I think the fact that, say what you want about like the first family of Buffalo media, I'm never going to say that. I think it's neat, but the fact that we're both from here, and I think we each, get this town in a really special way. It's a special place for us. I'll be the first to say, Melissa is talented enough to anchor in any market in the country that she wanted to. And she never really pursued that with any real zeal because she wanted to be here. And, I'd like to think that if I wanted to chase jobs that I could do that too. And I don't, as you said at the start, I'm in a place in a profession where I've found a spot where I'm really happy. But the reason that I'm really happy is because on Wednesdays in the summer I get to go up to Hickory Stick and play 9 holes with my dad, right? And that's not going to exist if I'm covering the Chiefs for the Kansas City Star. So there's some trade-off. Could we have chased promotions in our career and bigger jobs? Potentially, but would we have what we have in terms of our family and our friends and this network and feeling connected to the community? And it's more than just family and friends. It's, as you said, we do get recognized sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time, but when we go to Wegmans and, it happens a lot with Missy, that's really, really neat that she's got that connection and people feel like they know us and they know our family. And we love that. We absolutely love it. So that I don't know that we'd get that anywhere else. I don't think we would.
If Twitter counts for anything, you're more famous, just so you know.
I tell her that all the time. Don't worry. She knows that. Absolutely. And whenever I feel like I have to just kind of remind her of something, I let her know about Twitter followers. That's the only measure of popularity that I would ever win, for sure.
And I'm not even going to ask you who has the better. You clearly have the better job. I mean, you're writing about sports and a good football team now, and just I mean, and she's up what she gets up at like 2 a.m. to go to work. Like, I mean, who wants that?
2:15 the alarm goes off.
Oh, whatever.
Me, I hear it. Yeah, I hear it. So no, I do have a job that most sports loving fans would rightfully say, like, you've got the dream job, right? And yeah, I mean, listen, it's a job, right? Any job is going to have aspects or parts that can frustrate you, or and that goes for Josh Allen, I bet, right?
Sure.
$250 million contract notwithstanding. But no, it's a super, super cool job. All of the obvious perks that come with it are real. And but for her, in the TV industry, it's a challenge because you're either working that morning shift or you're working nights, really.
That's right.
And as a mom, right, and there aren't a lot of them at the station at Channel 2. She maybe is the only one that I know of. She wouldn't get a chance to see Elliott if she were on the night shift. So the morning shift, while you never quite normally get, you never normalize that schedule and that sacrifice. And I deeply appreciate that she makes it for our family, but it does afford her a lot of chance to see our son grow up, and she wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say your schedules don't jive. I mean, like when do you see each other? And the other, and just to piggyback on what we just talked about, like, how do you sleep through a 2:15 alarm, or are you just so used to it by now that you just automatically not sleep through it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a coin flip whether I sleep through it, but I'm used to it. But I know that I know it comes with the territory. Listen, I
Right.
mean, I know why she's getting up at that time, and so yeah, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But in terms of spending time together, we have a couple hours. She's usually home from work around noon. I get to work from home when I'm not out at the stadium. So especially now in the off season, I'm home a lot more. So we've got a couple hours there. Now that's her nap time though. And
Yeah.
listen, let me tell you about nap time. If there's one thing that you need to know about morning show TV personalities, and this is not just Melissa, this is Pat Hammer and Pete, I'm sure, is that nap time is not to be disturbed. So she needs those couple hours of sleep when she gets home before the bus drops Elliott off. And if she gets those, then the rest of the night is great. And if she doesn't, we know around 7 o'clock, like it's about time to dial things back. So so that we make it work, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And but nap time is a huge part of that.
All right, you've mentioned your son multiple times now, and I had planned to ask you about him anyway. You're wearing a Titleist golf hat. You love golf. We still have to, you and I, get out and play. We've been talking about it for years, to you and I play.
Yeah.
And you just were on vacation. You played a couple of rounds down in Florida and Georgia. And I know that Elliott is a champion golfer in the 7-year-old age group and just turned 8. So I got to ask you, I mean, there's lots of questions to ask you about this. Um, Clearly, I mean, he's traveling. You're taking him to tournaments around the country, at least
Yeah.
along the East Coast that I'm aware of. So I'm assuming golf pros are telling you something, or is this just something he fell in love with and all of a sudden is like kind of really good at, and this is something you're going to pursue, or?
I mean, he's a stud. Don't get this. He's amazing, and he has always loved it. I always tell this story, and it's an absolute true story. When he was a year old, laying on my chest on the couch watching TV, the first station that he learned, the first channel, 593, Dad. That was the golf channel. That's what he wanted on, and that was before cartoons. There was no Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol. It was Golf Channel. He wanted the Golf Channel on, and we've got video after video of him as a kid just watching golf and loving it. And first video that I have of him swinging a real club, he was still in diapers.
Wow.
He was turning 3 a month later, so he was still 2 years old. We were at the Whirly Golf Dome. He went through a phase for about 6 months where all he wanted to wear were swim trunks and rain boots. And eventually we just like, whatever, wear whatever you want. So he's swinging a real club in his swim trunks and rain boots in the middle of February in Buffalo. And that has, sort of been the start of it. And one thing that I'll mention, I'll shoot you the link. It's something that Missy did. He just turned 8 in March. March 5th was his 8th birthday. And Missy, for 6 months, worked on this project. She basically took every video, every photo that we have from him playing golf from the time he was that old up through February when we went out to Arizona and he won a big tournament. And she put it all in her this creative editing process that she does with her background at Channel 2, and created like a 20-minute long video that's on YouTube. So we have like a private YouTube link, and it chronicles his entire golf life. And it's just absolutely incredible. We had a little birthday party for him, and we showed, people the video, and, people were crying at the end of it just because of how well done it was. But just to have that memory is super, super special. And in terms of his ability, it's natural. It's God-given. I mean, I can hack it around okay. I love playing. I'm pretty good. I've played a long time, but I'm not a scratch golfer by any means. And he's taken some lessons here and there. Big shout out to Cindy Miller. I'm sure everybody in the Buffalo golf community knows she's been great. Mark Rosa, who I've taken some lessons with, Marlene Davis. Those are a couple of the pros who have really shown an interest and really helped our family along. Fred Zollner over at Diamond Hawk, I want to mention him too. Those people have really shown an interest in Elliott's golf career, really helped, just kind of bring it along. But yeah, he's a really, really good player. He plays U.S. kids golf tournaments. And just to give you an idea, last year as a 7-year-old, they have the World Championships. It's held at Pinehurst, North Carolina every year in July, kind of the American home of golf. And as a 7-year-old, they play. So 7-year-olds play only 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds play only 8-year-olds, and so on. There were 110 kids in the 7-year-old age group. Those kids were from 23 states and 10 countries. Usually the countries is a lot higher, but with COVID, a little tougher to get over into the US last year. So the countries was down a little bit, but out of those 110 kids, all of whom have to qualify. So you got to shoot a certain score to even get into that tournament. He was leading that tournament after the first round. He was the only kid to shoot under par, shot 35 on the first day, and ended up finishing in a tie for fourth out of 110. So, I was really proud of that. That's his best finish. He's won some regional tournaments in U.S. kids, but, to finish fourth in the world and to play in Buffalo, right, where you're playing 6 months out of the year, if you're lucky, really remarkable. Just super, super proud of him, and can't wait to see where this journey takes him, and what the game brings him next.
So what does he give Dad in terms of a percentage from his winnings?
Yeah, so you
are caddying for him.
Yeah, I do caddy for him, and unless he fires me, which has happened on a few occasions. He gets Sour Patch Kids for birdies. So I guess I should start carrying around I wouldn't want Sour Patch Kids, like peanut M&Ms, right? Those would be maybe when he has a bogey, I get some M&Ms or something like that. I don't even know, but yeah, that's right now. Those are the stakes. Is the bets are for Sour Patch Kids or maybe Skittles, depending on what he's feeling for the day.
Wow. So obviously he's a boy. He's gonna obviously grow a lot. I mean, you and your wife are both very tall.
Yeah.
And so if he is anything like the two of you, he's going to have arguably the perfect golf body because he's going to be tall and lean, right?
His pediatrician told us when he was 2 or 3 that expect him to be between 6'3" and 6'4". So he's going to have some height to him. And you're absolutely right. Kind of that ideal golf frame when you think of it's around that height. And yep. So that, that's what we're expecting.
Yeah. So I asked that question because clearly between now and then, lots going to change. So what's your, you're just going to keep going until he gets bored or gets interested in other sports. Is that kind of how you're going at this?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm a huge proponent of kids being, 3-sport athletes, multiple sport athletes, even more than 3-sport, right? I'm always going to want him to play other sports. We're super blessed and fortunate to live in a great area with a nice cul-de-sac where we have so many neighbors with boys, especially, but, young kids to play with. So when he comes home from school and it's, one day it's street hockey, the next day it's basketball, the next day it's 2-hand touch. And there's just a huge group of kids. I mean, I'm talking probably 8 or 9 boys, all within a fairly close age range to play that with. And so, he's in a little basketball league now through his school district. He's on a travel baseball team. He's actually playing up a year. He's the youngest kid on his 9 and under baseball team. He just turned 8. And that the same was true last year. One of his coaches told me last year he was on the 8 and under travel baseball team, which he made as a 6-year-old. He said he was the youngest kid in the entire league. So I was pretty proud of that too. Loves baseball. So we're looking forward to that season starting up. He's going to play as many sports as he can, as he wants to. I'm going to encourage that all the time. And then, in terms of golf, I mean, certainly that is the one that he's excelled at the most. But he's just so young still. I mean, there's kids that haven't even picked up a golf club, who won't pick up a golf club until 10 or 11, who are going to excel at it, in the same way or maybe even better. So we're just going to play it by ear and see where it takes him. The thing that I've really liked to see over the last few months, and again, we real quick in February, we went down to Tampa. He played the Under Armour Winter National Championship, 90 kids in that tournament, ages 6 to 8. He was 7 at the time. He finished solo 12th out of 90. Hadn't touched a club really since October. The following weekend, we went out to Phoenix, played a U.S. Kids Regional, which again, you have to qualify to get in. It's a step below the World Championship. There were 24 kids in that field, and he won, shot 34-34, so 68. And that's a big win. That's a really big win. But to see him win that and to kind of see him, he's starting to realize now that he's good, and he's starting, and I think that's inspiring him to want to do it a little bit more. I mean, you asked me tonight, could we do this at 7? I was at the Golf Dome at 7, so we need to do it a little later because Tuesdays is the Golf Dome. And so he wants to practice, he wants to play. And as long as that's the case, I want to find that happy medium between, giving him every opportunity to do that, but not wanting him to burn out on it too. And, Missy and I talk about it all the time. It's tough, for parents to not really have that roadmap. And that's where I'm going to kind of depend on those people that I talked about earlier that, I'm going to, need some advice from them from time to time. And that's why they've been great and so helpful for us.
Does he have a favorite golfer besides you?
He kind of bounces between guys. I think he was really into Bryson. He loved the idea of how far can a guy hit it, and now that he hasn't been playing as much, I think Scheffler winning, as much as he has, he likes Rory. I've shown him, some clips of Rory. His build is not going to be Rory though. It's going to be more DJ. So if I do show him a swing on YouTube, it's usually Dustin Johnson's. But he kind of just goes through it. He'll watch anybody though, but he was really intrigued by the whole Bryson thing and how far he could hit it. I think that I don't know that I'd call him his favorite, but he was definitely interested in what he was doing.
So what's his last Elliott question? We're spending a lot of time on Elliott here. What's the best and worst parts of his game?
I mean, he's so straight. He just keeps the ball in play. I mean, hits every fairway, just never gets himself into trouble. Again, it's going to sound a kind of braggadocious. I don't want to sound like that. He doesn't have any real weaknesses. I'd say some irons. He's got a tendency. If he slows the swing speed down, he might chunk a few irons here and there. I think anybody can do that. But I would say proximity to the hole on his irons is something that we're working on. Learning how far he's hitting the clubs. I mean, he's growing, he's getting taller, he's getting stronger. So that is a real difference, right? He hits things a lot farther than he did last year just because he's growing so quickly. So the iron play, I think, is always going to be something that he works on. But in terms of, off the tee, straight as can be, and I think he's a terrific putter. And then it's just figuring out that distance control. That's something we're going to work on a lot this year.
I can't wait until you and he, maybe you already do it, but until there's friendly bets. So
yeah.
It's old enough and you guys are more comparable. That will be really fun to watch. Okay. Let's segue now to back to your job now. Bills vets in this weekend, obviously draft in 2 weeks. Before I get to all of that, I got to ask you about a couple of things. One is I want to ask you about Brian Daboll. Mm-hmm. So I've heard some things. Brian Daboll leave because of Sean McDermott or because of the opportunity or both?
Oh, much more because of the opportunity than the first part. Yeah, I don't think the first part. I don't think that had much at all to do with it, if anything to do with it. I mean, it was the opportunity. I mean, this is a dream job for him. There's one of the, it's a cliche, you hear it all the time, but it's true. There's 32 of those jobs, and it's something that he's been working for 25 years, right? His entire professional existence has been this, this opportunity, and, it's a storied franchise and all of that. Did Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll have disagreements last year? Absolutely. 100% that happened. Those are two highly competitive, high-strung guys who believe in the way that they do things and believe in the way they want things done. I don't believe for a second, though, that had Brian Daboll not gotten a head coaching job, he would have went anywhere else for another coordinator position. Quite frankly, he'd be crazy to do that, to leave Josh Allen. So no, I don't think that Sean McDermott's presence had really much of anything at all to do with Brian Daboll leaving. It was more the opportunity and the realization of a dream, of a lifetime dream.
Would you agree that some coordinators take that opportunity, and for some of them, and I would maintain maybe more than half of them, it's a bad choice because a lot of times the jobs they take aren't good. In other words, the teams aren't good. The management in place isn't good. Now, granted, Joe Shane sort of went with it. We know how that all worked out.
Yeah.
But right, I mean, how many great coordinators going to go into head coaching positions in the NFL and fail in 2 or 3 years? That happens all the time. What kind of a head coach do you think he's going to be?
Well, I think he relates to his players. I think his players, respect his approach. I mean, he truly cares about them. I know that to be true. I mean, but listen, I mean, you talk about the situation that he's walking into. I mean, that is a heavy, heavy lift for those guys, right? For Joe Shane, he's got to deal with what with what Brandon Beane had to deal with here in Buffalo in terms of a hellacious salary cap situation. That's going to take some work. You've got a quarterback there who's a former first round pick, but nobody is sold on, right? How could you be? That doesn't mean that he can't succeed, but is he going to? Nobody knows the answer to that. And if he doesn't, then okay, so then you look at 2023, you're where the Bills were in 2018, right? You've got to maneuver yourself into a position where you can draft a quarterback that you believe in. He's got to be the right guy. Daboll's got to develop him along with his offensive staff. Is he going to be able to devote as much time to developing a quarterback as he did in Buffalo? Probably not, right? Because the head coach is the CEO. They've got other things that they've got to deal with. So a lot of things have to go right for Joe Shane and for Brian Daboll in New York. And by the way, right? It's New York. They're not going to have the longest of ropes. It just doesn't exist in that city. So I get why they left. I totally get it. I mean, if your dream is to, in Shane's case, run a team, in Daboll's coach, be the head coach, in Daboll's case, be the head coach of a team, that's logical. And to do it, with a historic franchise like the Giants, it's a great opportunity for both of them. You've got to be, when that opportunity is there, you've got to strike, right? Because we thought maybe the year before that it was going to be there for Daboll. I mean, the stars aligned. I still can't believe he didn't get the Chargers job, right? It didn't make any sense to me then. It still doesn't make sense to me. And you never know when that opportunity is just all of a sudden not going to be there. You look at Eric Bieniemy, right, with the Chiefs. We've been saying year after year, why isn't this guy getting a head coaching job? And eventually maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't, right? And so Brian Daboll, I think, easily could have been in that situation. Now, to your point, I want to take this in a bit of a different direction, right? There was some speculation, or there were some rumors that Daboll wanted to bring Ken Dorsey with him to be his offensive coordinator in New York. Ken Dorsey would have made the worst career move of probably his life had he done that. I mean, stay here, call plays with Josh Allen for 2 years, put up 30 points a game, and then you're the one getting those head coaching jobs, or at least those head coaching interviews, right? So I don't know how much there was of Dorsey ever being a legitimate, going to New York candidate. But, and by the way, he might not have even been playing, calling plays there, right? Because Daboll's there and maybe he does that. So that would have been a crazy career move in my mind for Ken Dorsey. I don't know, how much there was really to it, but he made the logical choice in my mind. You stay here. When you have Josh Allen, you stay here, you call his plays, and then in 2 years, you're knocking on the door of a head coaching job as well.
Yeah, and thank you for setting that up, because I was going to ask you about Ken Dorsey and what Bills fans should think about him. Because let's face it, I mean, now it's his gig, right? Now he's the OC. He's going to want to massage that game plan and massage, everything that goes into play. Like, he wants to have his own sort of play calling mentality and structure. So how much of that, everybody I think wants him to, do what Daboll did, because they did what they did and they scored all those points and they were hugely successful. And look at Josh, just went like that. And why would you change anything? But Dorsey's absolutely gonna want to put his finger on it and make it his own, right? So how much does it even notice, do you think, when we see the Bills offense in 2022?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think that there will be wrinkles, right? There has to be. I mean, it's not going to be as simple as just saying, here's Brian Daboll's offense, here's the keys to it, just keep the car on the road. I mean, that's not realistic to think. But I think the big factor here in this is that this is going to be a collaboration between Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen. Josh Allen has been around long enough now that he knows what he likes, he knows what he doesn't like. Listen, the Bills empowered Allen in a lot of ways to say, who do you want to be your next offensive coordinator? Not that he made the hire, but don't be fooled. I mean, his words went a long way. His feelings went a long way toward Dorsey being that guy, right? They want Allen, and it makes sense. I mean, he's the most important person in the franchise. and there's a pretty steep drop to number 2, right? That's how important Josh Allen is to this team. So and again, he's not going to call the plays. He's not going to do that, but he's going to work together, I would think, very, very closely with Ken Dorsey in terms of, hey, this is what we do really well. This is what I'm comfortable. This is what I like doing. This is maybe not so much what I like doing. And then, from that point, I think it's up to Dorsey to kind of build around those strengths and try to minimize those weaknesses, if you call them weaknesses. So I'd expect we'll see a lot of that. Of course, you're right. There are going to be differences, but one of the things about Daboll's offense was that it was pretty chameleon-like, and that's where he kind of he prided himself on that, right? He never wanted to be, put into a box of, we have to throw it 50 times to win because that's how I do it. He thought if we needed to run it 50 times a week, we're going to do that too. And that was, he meant that. I mean, that was always his conversation piece about, his philosophy on offense is do what it takes to win that week and highlight Isaiah McKenzie or highlight Dawson Knox. It didn't have to be throw it to Stephon Diggs every time. And, there were a lot of times I think fans maybe wanted to see more of that, but it just wasn't his style. He never believed in that. Maybe Dorsey does believe in that a little bit more in terms of playing up to your strengths, but Daboll's approach was a little different in that way. So we'll see that. I think that's, I'm looking forward to getting a chance to talk with Ken Dorsey about that. We haven't heard from him yet. That'll happen this spring. And I think that'll be one of the first questions, how much of this is going to be what you guys have been doing versus what you want to do.
Yeah. And I think Daboll was smart too. I mean, I think you probably in writing a lot of what you wrote and watching, I think he was a matchup guy a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know if you would agree with that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, he was absolutely about matchups. That was what, and if that meant giving the ball to Devin Singletary 20 times a game at the end of the season, that's what they were going to do. And, there were games, I think back to, maybe the Jets game, I think it was, where Stephon Diggs had maybe 14 targets. There was a sequence in that game where they threw to him in the end zone. It didn't work. And then they came back and ran the exact same play and it worked the next time. And right in that, to me, just says, we believe in this matchup. And that's what that's just one small example, but it stands out to me when you talk about his approach and his belief in, this is our favorable matchup. This is where we want to attack.
Okay. So now in terms of play call, now I'm going to fast forward now to the draft, because we're hearing a lot of people saying, who cares? I mean, mock drafts are what they are. It is what it is. I mean, the experts suck at mock drafting. We know this, right? I mean, McShay and
everyone does,
right? No one's good at it because it's so hard to predict. No one knows how the boards are going to fall in the end on draft night and the first night. But a lot of people are saying, typically to the Bills, it's going to be one of three positions. It's either going to be wide out corner or running back. And Breece Hall his name comes up like crazy. And for a team, you said it, their best player is their quarterback. I don't know why you draft a running back in the first round if your best player is your quarterback. I don't know. I mean, and also for whatever it means, I've gone through plenty of draft magazines and up and down online about the draft. And I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, but I think the running back class is actually pretty good. Like, you could get a guy in the third or fourth round that could do what you want Breece Hall to do potentially.
Yeah, I'm team don't believe in drafting running backs in the first round. That's my philosophy, right? But we need to point out, it's not Brandon Beane's philosophy. Right. It hasn't been. He has said that, he's not just said it though. I mean, there's evidence of it, right? You look at what they did in Carolina when he was part of that front office. They have drafted running backs in the first round, probably more often than you would even believe, right? Jonathan Williams, was it? D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart, Christian McCaffrey, I believe, were all first round picks, while Brandon Beane, and not to say that he was the guy pulling the card in those situations, but he was in those front offices, right? So he's been around it. And he has said if that player is the best on the board at the time, that he wouldn't shy away from doing it. So we know philosophically that the Bills wouldn't rule it out. Again, if I were Brandon Beane, it's not something that I believe is the right roster building move. Now, to your point, Brees Hall can come in here, and it's not that it's going to be a guy that you just turn around and hand him the ball 30 times, right? He can be involved as a pass catcher. I think that is probably, when you think about his fit in Buffalo, that would be the most attractive part of it. Is the value there? Is it right at 25? I don't know. There are so many different directions that this draft can go. And that's true for the draft as a whole, but then it filters down, especially to the Bills as well, because to your point, A, you don't know who's going to be there at 25. And then B, you don't know which positions they're going to prioritize, or are they truly going to do best player available?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then you can build a logical argument for a lot of different positions.
Mm-hmm.
We should point out, right? The Chiefs did it, right? Not all that long ago. They took Clyde Edwards-Helaire with, I think, the 31st pick. So pretty late in the first round, just a few picks later than where the Bills will be picking. So, teams have done it before. Would I be in favor of doing it? Not necessarily, but I think you could justify it in the sense that if you believe he is a difference maker who is going to take this already elite offense to even another echelon, then I think you could build a case for it.
Yeah. I am concerned, and I'm a little surprised more Bills fans aren't, that more hasn't been done in terms of the emphasis on corner. I think most of us know, or at least think or have heard, that Trey White is probably not going to be 100% come opening week. I mean, I think that's common, right?
History would tell you that for a guy coming off of an ACL tear when he had it, that first year back is not going to be exactly the same. And that's certainly true in September of his first year back.
Yeah. So now Levi Wallace gone. Now you got Dane Jackson, who's okay, serviceable, whatever. Yeah. But I'm really concerned that they've done nothing in free agency at the cornerback position. And I just get the feeling, and maybe this is just the Bills, as smart as they've been draft-wise, just saying, zip it. We're not saying or doing anything. We're not going to lead anybody to believe that we're taking a corner, even though there's a glaring need for one. Break down corner for me. What are we doing here?
Yeah, anybody can look at the roster, right? Just a casual fan can kind of look at the projected starting lineup and see that cornerback is a big time question mark because, Trey White might not be ready.
Let me interrupt you real quick, especially now in this new 2022 AFC, right? Yeah. And with the schedule that they have in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And right. And Dane Jackson, played some good football, but did he play enough good football to say, that guy's our starter? And even if he is, you still need another guy, right? You still need another cornerback to be that top backup. If let's say Trey White comes back and is great and Dane Jackson is a starter, who's your third corner, right? And now you say, well, you don't draft a backup in the first round, but let's, move on past that. To me, what the question that I'm kind of coming back to a cornerback is, does Sean McDermott's belief in his defensive system sort of trump the need, right? And does he believe so highly and so strongly in what his safeties can do that he feels like we're going to be able to get by at cornerback? I think there's a part of that. I think there has to be, right? Because they wouldn't have let Levi Wallace go on the contract that he received from Pittsburgh. That to me just says they believe they're going to find an upgrade from Levi Wallace, right? Because that was a low money deal. They could have come up with that. They could have found that in their couch cushions if they wanted to. Yeah. They didn't want to. So they believe they can find an upgrade. And the longer it goes without them addressing it. Now, maybe maybe they use a first round pick on this and it's a moot point, right? You draft a guy in the first round, you expect him at a minimum to come in and compete for a starting job. But I think there's a part of this that says Sean McDermott has looked at his history and said, I can build a defense, a successful defense, and I don't have to spend huge twice on corners, right? Because they already did once with Trey White. But you go back to Josh Norman, right? In his career in Carolina, he gets a massive contract with Washington and really never was the same player. He had some good years, but did Josh Norman receive that contract because of who he was as a player, or because, at least in part, what he produced in Sean McDermott's system? I think there's a part of that. So that to me is maybe why fans are panicking a little bit more than what the team is. And Brandon Beane has pointed out a lot of times that free agency isn't over, right? The draft is only a part of this, right? And we'll see, maybe Sauce Gardner goes in the top 5 picks, and the team that drafts him says, we don't need a cornerback anymore, and releases a guy that the Bills feel can come in and play. The trade market isn't closed, right? Bradbury from the Giants is a name everybody's speculated about, but maybe the money works out there, and there's a deal to be made there. So Brandon Beane's message at the owners meetings, I talked to him about this, and a lot of reporters did down in West Palm, and this was last month, was the season doesn't start next week, so don't panic. And until they address it in a meaningful way, I do think that question is going to linger. And I do think if you were looking at the draft from a logic, needs-based position, and again, we should point out that the Bills don't look at it that way, or at least they say they don't, then corner is the biggest need. And I don't think you can really argue any other position.
Well, you could, the other very simple argument that they could present to fans is, look, we went out and got Von Miller, right? We expect Russo and Epinesa and Boogie Basham to be better, and Jerry Hughes if he's still here, right? So pass rush will help if that's a backfield, right? If you have a better pass rush. So that's maybe another thing that they're banking on, where they know if that works how they're planning on it working, they don't have to rely on that back end as you might suspect they would need to rely on it. But just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. I think ideally, right, that does happen, right? And they tell you the same thing, that those units work together. You need the pass rush to have an effective secondary, and you need an effective secondary to help out your pass rush at times. There's no doubt they go hand in hand.
And then wide receiver has been talked about too, as I mentioned. And you got Davis and Diggs. You got some guys on the depth chart that were here a year ago. You got McKenzie and you got Crowder. What's the difference between McKenzie and Crowder? Crowder just a little bit bigger, not as better route runner. What's the difference between those two guys?
Yeah, I think Crowder, I think he's obviously a little bit more experienced. I think you're really looking at Crowder in my mind to be exactly the Cole Beasley replacement, and not to say they're the same player, but Jamison Crowder said himself when he signed here, when we had a chance to speak with him, that he modeled a lot of his game after and studied a lot of Cole Beasley tape. And that to me is a good sign, right? Because Cole Beasley was effective in his role. And, he played hurt last year. And you wonder what that did for his explosiveness, playing with 3 broken ribs. That's not easy, but he was so good at finding those soft spots in the zone. And I think Jamison Crowder is going to come in and have an excellent opportunity to do the exact same thing. When teams decide to defend the Bills that way with zone coverage, you're going to want Jamison Crowder to find those soft spots. And, we saw McKenzie, his strength going up against man coverage, what he did against the Patriots, right? And that's what a lethal thing that is for the Bills offense, to have those 2 weapons and to say, all right, you pick your poison. You tell us how you wanted to defend our offense, and we'll tell you who we're going to put on the field. So I like the Crowder signing. I thought it was really, really good value for the Bills to get a guy who's been really productive in New York when he's been healthy the last few years, with, obviously a much different quarterback situation than what he's stepping into here. So I think Crowder fills that Beasley role. It's only a 1-year deal though, right? So when you talk about wide receivers as a first round option, and I think, I'd be interested to see, maybe I'll, throw up a poll on Twitter or something, just what position do you want to see the Bills draft in the first round? I bet receiver gets a lot of votes. I wonder if it maybe even gets the most votes, maybe even over cornerback. I'd say those 2 positions, I would have to guess, would be 1, 2. But listen, giving Josh Allen another weapon in the form of a first round receiver, that's pretty appealing. I mean, you look at the 3 guys that Cincinnati ran out, right, in the Super Bowl. I mean, those are big time talents. And the Bills have Diggs. We know he's a big time talent. We believe Gabe Davis is going to be a big time talent. You base that just on what he did against the Chiefs, and you would expect that. And then who's that 3rd guy? Is it Crowder? Or is it potentially a first round pick who can come in and maybe pick his spots? I think that's really intriguing. And I can understand, I can get why fans would get behind that idea.
Yeah. Like that sizable straight line speed guy, a guy that's, 6'1", 6'2", that runs a 4.4, right? That's something that they don't have. And that would be,
I mean, my longtime sort of, you want to call him draft crush is Jameson Williams. I mean, I think absolutely. I think the closer we get, the more mocks you read, I think the less the likelihood is that he gets to 25. But I mean, you talk about adding that type of speed to this offense, it's intriguing, and I get why fans would be into that idea.
we're going super long, and I'm just going to real quick. I love OJ Howard. I thought the OJ Howard signing was phenomenal. He's
Yeah.
an athlete. He's huge. He's never really been given an opportunity because of injury in Tampa and the way that, the roster shook up with the addition of Gronk. I think he's going to be an incredible compliment to Dawson Knox. You?
Yeah, no, I mean it's low risk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out, then no harm, no foul, from the Bills' perspective. And listen, OJ Howard's going to be as hungry as a player can be to reestablish himself as not that he wasn't an NFL player, but I'd say, in terms of being a first round draft pick, he probably didn't meet the expectations that he had even for himself down in Tampa. So this is an excellent opportunity for him to step into what should be a great offense, put up numbers, show that he can stay healthy, and then see what that leads to next year for him, right? Because that, if he does, what you're talking about there, and if he forms that 1-2 punch with Dawson Knox, if he shows that he can be kind of an every down player for an offense, he's going to get himself a nice contract next year. So there's a lot. The Bills stand to benefit is obvious, right, in terms of what he can bring to the offense. And then OJ Howard stands to benefit in terms of, setting himself up for potentially a nice payday down the line.
Yeah, I just think tight end is becoming so trendy, man, because there's so many defenses that can't cover them.
Yeah.
These are guys with wide receiver ability that are massive people, right? So it's so hard to find a safety that can cover these guys, and almost every team's got one at this point, which I don't think. I can't recall seeing this kind of talent at the tight end position in a really, really, really long time.
Yeah, and the Bills only had one last year, right?
Right.
I mean, Dawson Knox was the only guy that was even active by the end of the season. I mean, Tommy Sweeney was the only other tight end on the roster, and he was a healthy and active pretty much down the stretch and into the postseason. So they needed to add at that position. I agree with you. I think Howard, again, low risk and potential high reward.
Okay. The Bills are favorites today to win the Super Bowl. That's a lot of hype, and it's worthy, right? It's deserved. Mm-hmm. But I'll throw right out there. I went on DraftKings and I put money on like the Chargers and a couple of the longer odds in the AFC teams because the AFC is just so damn stacked, man, and their schedule is so damn tough. Yes, they probably are top to bottom roster wise, and maybe with throwing the coach, the best team in the AFC, and they again are deserved of being the odds-on favorite at least to represent the AFC. And we know the NFC is a bit weaker now for a lot of reasons. So yes, maybe they should be, but man, I don't know. I don't have the confidence maybe that I should in making that wager just because the conference is so different.
Yeah.
And the schedule is so different than it was a year ago.
Well, the thing that I look at when I think about that is how does the seeding shake out for the playoffs, right? And one of the things that I think it kind of goes without saying, but it's worth repeating is, you can't lose to the Jaguars like you did last year, right? You cannot, that game, potentially cost them not having to go on the road in the divisional round, right. Or, if Josh Allen doesn't slip down in Tennessee, maybe they've got the number 1 seed. That has to be the goal for this franchise. I think the bye week is huge, but more so than that, it's the home field advantage. I mean, they're 3-0 now in the playoffs under McDermott and winless on the road. If I have that right, I believe that's the case. So that matters. We're at the point now where that sample size is getting big enough that we can say home field advantage is a huge thing for this team. And I think, when you look at the AFC West and how it may cannibalize itself, right? And the AFC Central, are you putting the Ravens over the Bills? I don't think I am, and, who knows what the Browns are going to be. I'm not picking them over the Bills by any stretch. So I still think that the Bills are in probably the most favorable division. And I think, with the Chiefs losing Tyreek Hill, we have to see the impact of that because, again, I think it's really hard to, okay, they've got 2 first-round picks. Yeah, they're probably going to take a receiver. And you'd think with Mahomes that offense is still going to hum. But listen, that guy is dynamic. I mean, he destroyed the Bills just time and again. And that's a big loss for them. And then, obviously you get to the Bengals, right? And, they should be the favorites. I mean, they're the defending Super Bowl champions. And I think they've had a really nice offseason. So to me, the challenge is going to be, can you do enough in your division to lock up the number 1 seed. And if you can do that, I think you've got to feel pretty good about the Bills' chances. I think their track record at home in the postseason under Sean McDermott and with Josh Allen is strong. And so they slipped up too many times in the regular season last year. They had too many instances where they let opportunities get away from them. And you only need to point to Tennessee and to Jacksonville and say, if those 2 things don't happen, maybe this season or, this past season goes different. So I think they've got to be, they can't afford those missteps this year.
And say what you want about Tua, but Tyreek Hill is now in our division. And
we
now see him twice in the regular season.
Yeah. And I think the Bills division got, more challenging. Certainly, Miami did. I don't know that you'd make that case for the Patriots necessarily or the Jets. Miami definitely got stronger, and maybe that means you don't sweep Miami. Maybe it means you split with Miami. But I'd rather be in the Bills spot than say the Chiefs spot when look at what the AFC West did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Anything I missed? Anything that you want to talk about that we didn't mention?
Yeah, man, I think we hit them all. I'm trying, I'll just quickly kind of talk about some of the stuff that we're working on. I went back and looked at, Brandon Beane's 2019 draft grade or draft class to kind of reevaluate that. And I think that was an interesting kind of thought exercise. What do we make of that class? I'll put it to you. You've got Oliver. Where's he land? Is he an A grade or, I gave it a B plus that pick right now.
Mm-hmm.
You got Cody Ford. That's a D. You've got Devin Singletary. I gave that a B minus. You got Dawson Knox. I gave that a B plus based mostly on what he developed into. And then you didn't get much out of the day 3 picks. It was Voshan Joseph, Jaquan Johnson, Daryl Johnson Jr., and then Tommy Sweeney. So you didn't get a ton out of the day 3 picks, but I think it's fair, 3 years into those guys' career to kind of evaluate that class. I think it's an interesting one. It maybe the book isn't totally written on those guys yet. You usually think 3 years is a pretty good time, but with the way that Oliver and with the way that Knox sort of ascended last year, if they can reach another level, that class looks even a little bit better, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. At Jay Skurski, right? On Twitter.
Yeah, that's it. Just very simple. At Jay Skurski.
Very good. I'm sorry. One day I was going to have you on yesterday, but I figured you were busy.
Absolutely, of course. I mean, come on, right? You got the pussy willows out, and you got the water, the squirt guns and everything. And yes, Missy actually reminded me gently in the morning to make sure that I dressed Elliott in red for Dingus Day. So I certainly did that on the way to school. And a good Polish Western New York family that we celebrated Dingus Day accordingly.
Fantastic, man. Well, dude, great seeing you. And I hope to see you soon. Let's definitely get on the golf course soon and continue, obviously, your terrific work and your dream job that you have.
Appreciate it, buddy. And yeah, the weather's got to improve here enough to get on the course soon, right? I would hope.
This snow's got to go, dude.
Yeah,
I'm going to come up with a T-shirt that just says "Snow's got to go" or something. I don't know. One of the million T-shirt shops in Buffalo will probably print it for me too.
I would think, yeah, I would think so.
All right, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right, buddy.